Sasser. I'm the Director of Litigation for Liberty Institute, and I've spent a better part of a decade both suing and defending governmental entities in the area of the First Amendment, including free speech and religious liberty issues. The Liberty Institute, like other organizations such as the ACLU, seeks to protect the rights of students to express what are sometimes unpopular views at school, even views that reflect particular religious sentiments. Decades ago, the student speech fights were much different. They had students who wanted to protest the Vietnam War in very military-friendly towns, were wearing black armbands to school, and they had to take their case to the Supreme Court in order to ensure their right to free speech. You had students in the South who were wearing freedom buttons to protest desegregation. Not a very popular stand for them to take at the time. They had to take their case to the courthouse too in order to prevail and ensure that they have the right to wear the freedom buttons. And in the middle of World War II, there were two elementary school children who did not want to say the Pledge of Allegiance. They wanted to express their patriotism in other ways. They too won the right. These early victories have led to a body of clearly established law that protects students' free speech rights while they're at school, specifically as relevant to this particular issue, the religious viewpoints or the viewpoints that students may express. The case law is very clearly established. There has been no wavering for more than half a century that students must be free from viewpoint discrimination perpetrated by the schools. Unfortunately, the schools have not always responded to the case law positively, and that has led to continuing conflicts of schools engaging in sort of roving censorship of religious speech. Some examples that I would like to share, and these are not limited to any particular faith. It seems that students of all faiths have had their troubles recently invoking the laws that have been hard fought and won by our group and ACLU and others. For example, there was a student in Muskogee, Oklahoma. She wanted to wear her hijab, her head covering that is consistent with her Muslim faith. And it took litigation to enforce her clearly established law to make sure that she could continue to wear her hijab at school. You have little kids who wanted to hand out candy cane pens to their classmates, not causing a major problem, but those candy pens had to be confiscated by the school because they were too dangerous for all those other kids to see, because they had attached to them a religious message about the candy cane. Jesus pencils being ripped out of kids' hands while they're standing in line after school outside the school building to get on the school bus because, you know, this type of message was not going to be tolerated. There's a lot of intimidation and harassment that goes on in schools. Unfortunately, a lot of it seems to be directed at religious students expressing their religious faith, and attempts by government roving censors to ban that speech. It's quite unfortunate that this sort of uptick is going on, and if you'll read the paper, you'll notice that many of the cases that we're citing the current examples are within the past few years. And this seems to be a growing trend of sort of this roving censorship of religious sentiments at school. Another example that I might give is that, you know, again, it's not a matter of one particular faith. There was a school district in Texas recently that the ACLU had a case on that the kid wanted to wear his hair length longer than the dress code allowed because of his Native American faith. Well, that law has been clearly established for many years in the Fifth Circuit, yet the school district continued to fight to try to ban him from wearing his hair. So this is a very sensitive issue and a very litigious issue that's going on, which is totally unnecessary because the law has been, like I said, clearly established since World War II. One of the outgrowths of sort of the call, there's been a call for training students and trying to persuade them to hold particular views, as that runs directly in conflict with clearly established law from the 1943 West Virginia versus Barnett case that I alluded to before, dealing with the Pledge of Allegiance. Justice Jackson, in that marvelous opinion, really expressed, I think, the sentiments that most Americans agree with, which is that our school districts are not there to teach and ingrain into our students a particular orthodoxy. They're not to decide what is right and what is wrong on questions of social importance. Those are to be left to parents and other institutions. And that has been our law since 1943. As a matter of fact, I think the Supreme Court said it best in Tinker versus Des Moines, and I would just like to read the quote because it's really a magnificent quote. It warns against this type of indoctrination to try to teach students of a particular, whatever it is, whatever view it is. This happens to be the homosexual rights issue, but it could be on any issue. That any departure from absolute regimentation may cause trouble. Any variation from the majority's opinion may inspire fear. Any spoken word in class, in the lunchroom, or on the campus that deviates from the views of another person may start an argument or cause a disturbance. But our Constitution says we must take this risk. And our history says that it is this sort of hazardous freedom, this kind of openness, that is the basis of our national strength and of the independence and vigor of Americans who grow up and live in this relatively permissive, often disputatious society. Freedom to speak amongst our students has been a clearly established right for many, many, many decades. It affects a broad range of issues, from students fighting against racial desegregation, or segregation rather, students protesting the Vietnam War, or even today students protesting military actions in other parts of the globe. These rights are very precious because, as the Supreme Court has said, we have to be careful lest we strangle the free mind at its source amongst our students, who obviously are the most impressionable. And that impressionability is greatly impacted by the power imbalance that school officials exert over them.
Thank you, Mr. Sasser. Ms. Byard?